Hello, this is the Hall Institute's Forum, and I'm your host, Michael Riccards. Today we're looking at the topic of deafness, and we have two guests that are going to help inform us on this extremely important and frequently misunderstood aspect of our lives. Dr. Lalwani, who is Mendik Foundation Professor of Physiology and of Neurosciences at the New York University School of Medicine, and Lori Hall, who's a member of the board of the NYU Center for Hearing Health. Welcome to both of you. We're glad to have you. Doctor, give us a little bit of a kind of definition of hearing loss and how you got involved in this area of research.
Well, I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and I specialize in the area of just the E part of that, ears. And it was really my mentors in San Francisco, where I trained at University of California, San Francisco. And it's a center of excellence in hearing and hearing loss, and it is one of the places where cochlear implants were designed. And that's where I initially was first interested. I think to really understand hearing, or deafness really, we have to know exactly how hearing works. Now, it's not very uncommon at all for people to confuse hair cells in our scalp with the hair cells in the inner ear. So let's take a look at this model of the ear that we have. We're going to go ahead and do some surgery and remove the top of the ear. And we can see the outer ear and the ear canal coming down to the eardrum and three little bones, the malleus and the incus and the stapes, or the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, all connected to the inner ear, which has two parts. The cochlea for hearing is the spiral-shaped organ, and the balance canals for balance hooked up to the hearing and balance nerve. When we lose our hearing, the primary problem really is the hair cells that are inside the cochlea. They have these little tufts of cilia on the top that sense the sound wave, and they convert it to an electrical signal. And that's how we hear. So when that doesn't work, we have hearing loss or nerve deafness. And when there's fluid behind the eardrum, that's when you get an ear infection or something. That's called a conductive loss. That's because the sound is being blocked from coming into the inner ear.
Lori, how did you get interested in the whole topic of hearing loss?
Actually, my father had an acoustic neuroma in his 60s and became unilaterally deaf following the surgery. And before I met my husband, he was a patient at the center, I guess almost 30 years ago, with the same affliction. He had an acoustic neuroma as well, and his hearing was restored, but I guess over time there's progressive hearing loss that's associated with that. So my husband, George, went back to the center many years later and helped fund the Department of Otolaryngology to do head and neck cancer research, and in turn I sit on the board.
As you look at the future of implants, people have focused on the costs. They're supposed to be terribly expensive, and they're not covered by most insurance policies. Has that been your experience?
Well, certainly when we started cochlear implantation in mid-1980s, when they first came on the scene, cochlear implantations were not covered by insurance. And in fact, it was a major struggle until really the first part of the 21st century. And that's when the technology was over and over again shown to be effective in restoring hearing in individuals that had no sense of hearing. They weren't able to hear their grandchildren, their parents, use the telephone. And when it became clear that with implantation, young children could be mainstreamed, they didn't need to go to special schools, when the elderly could use the telephone when they could barely hear anything, there was a big change in all insurance policies with respect to covering cochlear implants. What's not covered, though, is less severe forms of hearing loss. hearing aids. So the vast majority of our population, let's say by the time, about 10% of our population, 30 million Americans, have a hearing loss that is significant enough and that would benefit from the use of hearing aids. But only about 1 in 5 actually goes out and purchases a hearing aid, in large part because they're very expensive, they're not covered by insurance, and anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000.
What is the difference between a hearing aid and an implant?
Well, Mike,
I don't want to be upstaged by an ear here.
Yeah, no. And this is not made of silicone. I think it's a different compound. A hearing aid, what it does is simply amplifies the sound. The hearing aid normally goes right here in the ear canal or outside or behind the ear. So the hearing aid amplifies the sound, but uses your normal mechanism of hearing. That is, the sound still goes to the eardrum, 3 bones, to the hair cells. So that hearing aid is capable of making things louder, but one of the other problems that we often have as we get older is that things are not clear. So while hearing aids can make things louder, it doesn't necessarily make things clearer. On the other hand, cochlear implants, they're not transplants, they're really an electronic prosthesis. There's an electrode that is placed surgically inside the cochlea. And there's an external part that picks up sound, codes it, and transmits it to the electrode in the cochlea. What's remarkable about this is that where a hearing aid makes things only louder, the cochlear implant makes it perceptible and clear, but it requires surgery.
Let's stop for a second, we'll break, and we'll come right back.